Those are some of the community activists speaking about the conviction of former Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke. Now, why are they important? They're some of the activists that secured the release of the video footage which led to this outrage that has been boiling up in Chicago about the way the police department treats the citizens. But we just heard from some of the defense team and from the police union. They're pushing back on this, calling this, in the words of the police union, a sham trial, a disgusting charade, and saying that 12 ordinary citizens were duped, basically, by the prosecution here. The defense saying that police officers, after this verdict, won't even want to get out of their cars to police the city. Matt Mangino is an attorney who joins us here on the Law and Crime Network, and he's back with us this afternoon to break some of this down. Matt, what do you make of this? These statements coming from the defense and the police, do they are they tone deaf to this, or is that too much to say?
Well, I think it's a historic verdict. I mean, this is the first time in 50 years that a police officer has been convicted in Chicago of shooting someone, killing someone. So I think it's it's an historic day, but it's also an important day. This case was presented to 12 jurors who listened to the evidence and made a decision. Clearly, it appears, based on the evidence, that second-degree murder was the appropriate charge in this case, and the appropriate verdict. It didn't appear to be a first-degree murder case. So I think the jurors, did their duty and came up with this verdict.
Look, I agree with you 100% on this being the proper charge here, and this is why. Look, I get why prosecutors wanted to go for that top charge of first-degree murder, and they wanted to go there because of that statement from Officer Van Dyke. On the way to the scene, we're going to have to shoot him. That's what came out of defendant Van Dyke, Officer Van Dyke's mouth, and prosecutors had that much of a hook to charge this as first-degree murder. They really said that basically proves the intent element, and it does away with the justification defense, because how could he be justified for pulling the trigger before he shows up and assesses a scene? So they went for it, but it wasn't an easy one for prosecutors to prove. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, the statement by Jason Van Dyke on the way to the scene that, we may have to shoot him, I think that the jury had to examine that statement and say, was that a planned, premeditated statement that we're going to go there and we're going to shoot him, and I'm going to take action to stop Laquan McDonald. And I think the jury, and at least my own impression, is that this is kind of talk in the heat of the moment on the way to the scene. The issue here was, did he have justification for what he did? And his justification that he had was mistaken, and that's an appropriate charge for second-degree murder. And that he shot Laquan McDonald 16 times, and in each one of those shots, it was aggravated battery. So clearly, the jury didn't buy that he was exercising, justification, using deadly force in an appropriate manner, and that this charge and the resulting conviction of these specific offenses appeared the right call by the jury.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of some of these statements that are coming out of this? I know that you agree that this is a historic verdict. Look, I agree with that as well. We had another officer convicted in Texas not terribly long ago. We watched that here on the Law and Crime Network. That was the Roy Oliver case. Now we've got this one. And look, we've had a couple of years of resentment bubbling up with the Black Lives Matter movement and whatnot against the way police are actually policing their communities. And they're policing in a more and more aggressive manner, according to a lot of the critics out there. This is certainly another in a series of such episodes, but this time it's got some legal teeth. I agree with you that this probably should be a second-degree murder conviction, but looking at what the police union is saying, it looks like they don't think it should have been any kind of verdict. They think it should have been an acquittal. So is this just going to result in the activist community that thinks that the police have gone too far, and the police just not listening to one another and digging in their heels and entrenching further and further?
Well, obviously, the police, the Fraternal Order of Police, they're going to defend their officer, and they're going to suggest that 12 jurors can't really put themselves in the place of a reasonable officer under the circumstances. One of the things in the closing argument that was interesting yesterday by the defense was that, hey, this is beyond what most of us understand. We run from danger, and these guys have to run to danger. And so, you can respect that his fellow officers are going to support him in this.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, police officers, they're trained. They know that they have to make snap decisions. These snap decisions are often life and death. And in this situation, he made the wrong decision.
Matt, I want to stop you there.
In what he did.
Matt, I want to stop you there because we've got to take a quick break here, Matt, and we're going to come back in a couple of minutes. We want to get through this break because jurors who actually tried the case are going to speak, and we will bring that to you as soon as we were able. First, this, though, here on Law and Crime. That was the verdict as it came in it was about 2 hours ago against Jason Van Dyke, former Chicago police officer who was accused and now convicted of murder related to the death of Laquan McDonald. I'm still on the line with Matt Mangino, who's been kind enough to hang around this afternoon with us here. Matt, I appreciate that you've been waiting patiently and listening to these extraordinary comments from a number of jurors who agreed to step forward not long after they delivered that verdict and explain some of what went through their minds. I was very impressed by that panel of jurors. They were articulate. They seemed like they really tried to do their job to the best of their ability, and I applaud them for that.
Well, no question. I thought it was a fascinating glimpse into what jurors go through, and for listening to them as they walked out of the jury room. So this is fresh in their mind. And the thing that was striking was how conscientious they were, how important it was to them that they realized that they had an important duty and they wanted to carry out that duty. For me, as a trial attorney, either as a prosecutor or defense attorney, that's the first place I go at the end of a trial is to the jurors to try to get some input, to find out what was important, what I thought was important, and what they thought was important. And it's always interesting to hear the dynamics of what jurors go through.
Look, I agree. And, we hear from jurors sometimes in cases like this, and sometimes we don't. But I think here the jurors seem to really take their duty seriously. And they said that they really took it seriously. But listen to some of the words that came out of those jurors in that brief interview that they did. They said, we went for second-degree murder because in his mind, in Jason Van Dyke's mind, he thought this was a deadly threat as he was experiencing it inside his own head. It's just his perception was wrong. That's what juror after juror after juror said. Look, legally, okay, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the verdict, legally, that is exactly what a second-degree murder conviction was. Legally, they followed the law and they applied it properly.
Yeah, there's no question that they made every effort to follow the law as it was instructed them by the judge in this case. And interesting, how they made that decision between first-degree murder and second-degree murder, and that they felt that he was authorized or lawful to carry a gun, even lawful to use deadly force, but not under these circumstances. His conduct was not appropriate, and therefore they convicted him of second-degree murder. The other thing that's fascinating when you listen to jurors is you think you put so much work into one aspect of the case or one witness, and you hear jurors say, well, I didn't care for that witness because, she was a little cocky, or I didn't like her demeanor. So you never know what jurors are going to do, and you never know what they're going to use in terms of evaluating evidence. And so I think it's fascinating to hear this. And you can see how conscientious these jurors were about their responsibility and their duty.
I agree with that. Look, a couple of the jurors said that this officer, Jason Van Dyke, should have taken a different tactic. He should have used other options, in the words of one of those jurors. He should have been more patient. He should have waited for the taser vehicle to arrive that had been called. He should have de-escalated instead of escalated. And those thoughts were then agreed to and summarized yet again by another one of the jurors who spoke. You know, I wish we had Vincent Hill back on here. He's the law enforcement expert. He's a former police officer. You know, is it possible for this officer, Jason Van Dyke, to have taken those other tactics instead of pulling the trigger in a situation like this?
Well, it certainly is. I mean, I think the jurors in this case, felt as though there were other options that were available to Jason Van Dyke. That using deadly force was not the appropriate action in this case. You know, whether it was to try to de-escalate, we heard from the jurors, or whether it was, to try to use some other means of restraint, whether it was a taser or other, but not to shoot 16 shots into Juan McDonald, under the particular circumstances.
You know, one of the other jurors said this was not the best decision from Jason Van Dyke. He's trained. He's been on the force 20 years. He should have thought better and, again, should have contained, not escalated. So many of these thoughts from these jurors seem to be backing up the thoughts of so many people who watched that squad car recording that we've seen a number of times and that we played again here today. And they did indeed say that they looked at that about 3 times back there in the jury room as they were making their decision. Kind of interesting, though, Matt, very, very quickly here. The initial vote was 7 guilty, 3 undecided, 2 not guilty. Apparently many minds were changed back there, or at least 5 of them.
One of the things that I thought was interesting as well was the decision for Jason Van Dyke to testify in this case as well. Jurors thought.
Crime, we'll be back with live programming starting at 9 a.m. Monday morning. For now, this is Aaron Keller, and for everyone at Law and Crime, have a good evening.